We talked a little bit about the suspension on Friday. Somebody asked about it, and I thought it was going to be reduced. I thought maybe just one game. Well, no games is what it came down to because the deal was off the table, and the suspension deal with Harbaugh and the NCAA broke down. Now, you can sit there and take this one from a lot of different angles. You're a Michigan fan, you're watching this. So if I'm a Michigan fan and I'm watching this and I'm thinking about Jim Harbaugh, he was going to be suspended for 4 games, maybe 2, maybe 1, and now he's not going to be suspended for this upcoming season. That's good news. Having Jim Harbaugh from game 1. Now, I didn't think that it was going to matter if he missed all 4 of those games, which I didn't think was going to be likely. They were going to be okay, saying that Harbaugh was going to be able to coach the team through the week, and he just wasn't going to be there on Saturday. But it's not a good appearance. And every game, even if you had the same announcers, they'd be saying the same thing. It'd be the big story. It would be the lead story. Jim Harbaugh not on the sideline. So this season, you're not going to hear that. You don't have to hear that during game day. Maybe during the game, it'll come up like, he's got he was going to be suspended. Who knows what the NCAA is going to do? But so it's off till 24 at the earliest, if it's going to happen, this suspension. So if you're a Michigan football fan, I'll go back to it. I think it's good news. Harbaugh's going to be on the sideline. That is good. Now, I saw Tom Mars, who's Harbaugh's attorney. I didn't put his quotes, but you'll just have to take it from me. The tenor of it was that Mars is like, why is the NCAA running their mouth? I thought there was a gag order. We're not supposed to say anything, and the NCAA saying things under the table to their mouthpieces like Pete Thamel and Dan Wetzel, which he does have a point. Also, you could say that the NCAA might have a point where you go back to Indy and, Jim Harbaugh was asked about the suspension. He said, look, I can't talk about it, which is what you're supposed to say, and you understand that part. But he actually didn't have just nothing to say. He said there's nothing to be ashamed of, which actually is saying something about it. Now, it is parsing words. It is coming out there and saying, look, how many times was he asked? 10 times. And did he say every single time, I can't talk about that because it's the NCAA? No, he didn't. The first thing that he said is like, yeah, I would like to talk about it. I don't have anything to be ashamed about, but I'm not going to talk about it. So he actually did say something about it. Now you can say, that's not that big of a deal. I don't think it's all that big of a deal either. Was that where the NCAA got mad? Because they're like, why is Harbaugh over there? We told him, or he's not supposed to be talking about it. And he did. These kind of things can make people that are in power upset. I think you always, when we deal with the NCAA, increasingly, you would have said this 10 years ago, you would have said this 20 years ago, that, yeah, they're a joke, they're toothless, but, they're there. They do have, they do have a tooth in there. They do have some power, and, they were levying it. They were trying to, and so now it's not there. The good news is it's not going to, I would not think, affect this season at all. Besides random people, rivals, and, other people that just like talking about Harbaugh, it did fill up another segment for them as they're able to talk about it. Certainly they did talk about it right up until Indianapolis. It was supposed to be big news. Michigan, one of the top teams in the country. They're not going to have their head coach. Now it's off the table. So now it gets talked about again. You can say, wow, that part's good news. It was never going to be that big of a deal anyways. It's now good news overall for this upcoming season, the way I see it. The couple things where you could say this is a negative part, just getting it done. Like if they would have agreed to 2 games and, Harbaugh, didn't play nice with them. And so it ended up being 2 games, that would be talked about during those games, but then it'd be water under the bridge. You couldn't go back. Once you got into game 3, it was going to be once the night game for Bowling Green. There was no reason for the announcers to be like, oh, Harbaugh. Well, I guess, they'd say, oh, here he is on the sideline. But then by the time the conference season started, there would be really no reason to bring it up. It would be over with. Now you have this, I don't know whether you think it's going to hang over the head of the program. I don't think that. I mean, Harbaugh is going to be able to handle it. I think the team is going to be able to handle it. You see, how they handled it here. So, is it you call a nothing burger? I guess the pun, there is intended. Mostly, it is something to talk about. There are the two items that I think that you should at least be aware of, and you probably are. Again, if you're a Michigan fan, you have Jim Harbaugh's contract that he was supposed to get a new contract and it was going to be signed, and it never was. And if you're a big Michigan fan, and I see a lot of Michigan fans, they think that he didn't sign his new deal because of the NCAA investigation. You weren't going to, that was the roadblock in him signing this new deal. A lot of Michigan fans felt that way. There's the other side, and I don't know if it's all Michigan. Like, I kind of feel this way. I'm just giving you my honest opinion about it. I think that Harbaugh he wanted to sign a new deal, but he wanted to take off the table the big buyout for the NFL. I think that was a sticking point for him. So he said, no, I'm not going to sign it. And then you had Michigan fans thinking, no, he's not signing it because the NCAA investigation, and Harbaugh may, not be signing it. So he could potentially go to the NFL. That's what I believe. At least and if you're a big Michigan fan, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, I might not. It does give him options. If he wants that option after this season with a low buyout, it's going to be there. And he can use the NCAA investigation as, it's still out there, as why he isn't signing it. If people are, like, Harbaugh's as good as gone. Well, no, you could come back and say, no, it's the NCAA investigation. This gives, to me, Harbaugh options. And, do we need to revisit every offseason for the last 3 years? In 2020, coming off the pandemic, I do believe that he wanted a little leverage with the NFL, but nobody was going to give him the time of day. Nobody was kicking the tires. He didn't put his name out there. He was expecting his phone to ring, and apparently it didn't. 2 years ago was the whole Vikings situation. So we do know the interest there. Of course, after the Vikings situation, he said that he was sometimes you can't outdo happy or whatever it is. And, he said he's done. Tell Ward I'm done, interviewing with teams. But then this last year, he talked with both the Panthers and the Broncos. And then, again, coming from a Michigan fan standpoint, a lot of Michigan fans said, oh, no, he didn't really interview with those teams. He was just using it as leverage, for his contract situation. Okay. But, he did just say that he was done doing all that. And then he went out there and talked to two teams. I look at things as, how they appear to me on the surface. I think it was Harbaugh actually during his tenure that said, hey, judge me by my actions. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm looking at the evidence and I'm looking at the actions. I'm looking at a guy who said, no, I'm done. I'm not interviewing anymore. And then he was out there talking to other teams. So people could say and have their opinion about whatever you want. That's mine. With the NCAA, good news for this year. In the long haul, is it good news? I don't know. It gives Harbaugh options. If I'm Harbaugh's agent, if I'm Jim Harbaugh, and I have whatever you think the chances that he would go to the NFL, that it increases with him having a very low buyout, which it does increase his options. He has that. Now, I am going to look at it just from the Michigan football program. What is best for the Michigan football program is that if Jim Harbaugh stays around, that's what's best. So I understand why people are saying that the NFL doesn't want him. I think they're wishful thinking like that. I happen to think that they, really could. I could easily, come up with, a bunch of reasons and examples. Of course, there's a lot of reasons and examples with how many times he's been passed over and everything. So that ongoing saga, it's still there. It is best for Michigan football if he signs a contract with a big buyout and that there's not going to be any chance of any NFL team, but it's there. And if it means, Harbaugh in Michigan has a great year, and then you have to deal with January or February Harbaugh again, which we did last year and which we have for at least the last 2 years, well, that's just a price that you have to pay. That's the way I look at it. And I hope that he stays with the Michigan football program. There's, the program's not bigger. One person, even a coach like Harbaugh, is not bigger than a program. One player certainly is not, but one of the very most, I don't say the most important. I was going to say one of the very most important. It is one of the very most important. I think it's the most important thing in college football is who your head coach is. So Michigan right now has a top, you want to say top 5 for sure, head coach in college football. And this season is setting up where I don't think he's going to fall out of the top 5. So you want him to stay around. So that's a long-winded way of going around talking about Harbaugh and the situation. Good news in the short term, we don't know about the long term, but it also could end up playing out where it's no big deal anywhere around. And, with the suspension of next year, they could all just go away. There could just be a fine, which I would just be fine with.